And without further ado, if you've been here before, you know what we're going to do next. If you're new, grab your remote and have your thumb on the play button. But don't press it, because we're going to do that at the same time on the count of 3. Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yes, and that was great, Shauna. Nice work.
Thank you. All right. All right. And 1, 2, 3. Let me get back to the app.
I just love her dress.
She's got shoe sale face on.
I like her purple hat.
This sounds like it's from like
I
The Little
love it.
Mermaid or something.
It's Sutton Foster singing.
Oh, okay, there you go.
And
I was
her
like, this definitely does not sound like it's an authentic song from the 50s.
and
Hey,
her
John,
handbag matches her hat perfectly.
does my
Have
type
we
A hat look like that purple hat on her head?
have we ever seen her wear the same coat?
I think
No.
so.
She has
Get
lots of dress and coat sets.
Can you guess what I'm now not I'm going to be looking at in every scene that has it?
Just hats.
Hats.
Just hats.
Look at that
Just
lady in the elevator with her. That hat's very interesting.
Red
yeah,
hat.
It's almost a
that's
fascinator.
almost a fascinator.
Jinx.
I feel like she's worn that green coat a couple of times. No, not in this episode, but
Oh,
previous episode.
I mean it would be in her wardrobe. She would wear it again, right?
you never know.
She wants the job for the hat and the coat.
I'm not gonna lie. When she mentioned the jacket with the tapered waist and the hat, I was almost sold.
Same.
Revlon actually made a lipstick based on this show, like a whole line.
I don't keep up with the makeup genre, so.
This gives me flashbacks to my grandmother and her lipsticks. She had a hoard of lipsticks, and
Kendra,
That
did she put them
realization.
all? Did she put them all on a mirror on top of her dresser?
Yes.
My
There
grandmother
were
did that.
several mirrors though, and they were perfectly organized, and there were different ones for different outfits and different times of the year. And going shopping with her to buy lipstick was so fun.
Barb had lipstick and rouge. She would just like wear lipstick and rouge. And that's all she had. That's all she would wear.
I love that she says she'll grab coffee on the street because that's such a thing.
I love this outfit from head to toe.
I do too.
Bravo, Midge.
I just want her whole wardrobe.
It's perfect. I love
I
it.
think her mom's dress is very nice too.
I think it's got flight attendant vibes.
Yeah.
The charm.
But flight attendants
Absolutely.
back then dressed so cute.
He's like, okay, sure.
And
oh my
another hat.
gosh. They have a toast holder on the table. My grandma had one of those.
Our grandmas must have grew up in the same kind of way. You're describing my grandmother.
I love how he quizzes her on how she's going to get there. He is trying to find any excuse to make her not go to work. My gosh.
Aw, she's so excited.
The book she was reading also sort of matched her dress.
They have separate men's and women's break rooms. What a luxury. Oh, I really miss those vending machines with those pull things to get your stuff. They were so much more fun.
Yeah, like playing pinball, but for your treat. They always remind me of the pinball pull.
They still have vending machines.
They're not the same.
They are a little different.
I love the way they all just sat down on the bench. Like it was like a
Yeah,
musical move.
it felt so choreographed. I love that.
Ugh, it was so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I love this so much. I think this is my favorite episode so far, and we're only 5 minutes.
In general, the scene is very choreographed. Like, the way they walk, their arms are moving in sync, and all of this presenting the different aspects of it. It feels very much like a music.
And now there's a musical score behind it.
I love it though so much.
I love that they're all wearing shades of the same color, but not the same outfits. It kind of furthers that uniform feel.
I love that one of their rules is always be pretty. I worked at this retail store and she would check us from head to toe when we came in. And if we weren't like hip enough or pretty enough, she'd send us home and make us change.
I like her handbag.
Why can't we
That it
dress like
matches with
that?
the hat.
Wh-
It's so.
Why can't why can't we dress like that these days
We can.
without somebody
You
going,
can, it's
wow,
just a
that's
little
weird.
expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work.
I love that shot with the subway when it goes to the outside the car. Ugh, I love that so much.
It's a pretty cool shot, zooming right out that little portal hole.
I didn't see the TV for a minute and I thought the kid was sitting there staring at the wall.
It's interesting that she's not wearing stockings or pantyhose or whatever they were called back then, because I would think that the polished look would contain, include pantyhose.
Yeah, but wasn't it later when they came up when pantyhose came out?
They were around in this time. They were just kind of like they were around during
They were,
wartime, so they're
yeah,
kind of like
they
a
were
luxury.
luxury. They were very expensive.
Yeah, and I imagine during this time period were they still in the time when they were kind of like stockings that you connected to a garter belt to hold them up.
This is a very musical
I
episode.
love this.
But sheer hosiery did lose its decline in 1995, where we don't wear it.
Yeah, I recently got made fun of because I asked my sisters if we could stop so I could get some pantyhose, and they both looked at me like I was crazy.
Susie's hat's a fiddler's hat. I think that's what they call it.
I love that hat.
I feel like she might go up there and bomb for the first time.
I like that. That's not bad.
Fanny Midge works.
I love how she can't read the room.
This isn't going well, is it?
No, because she's talking to a bunch of people who have hourly jobs.
Ah, that's better. I spoke too soon. Yeah, spoke too soon.
Oy.
I kind of figured she would bomb.
She needs to bomb.
Yeah, she hasn't had a not bombing yet.
Yeah, I knew they were setting it up though as soon as she didn't want to run her act by Susie.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
can talk
and
about
That's a
it.
good catch.
in general, she needed a little bit of a fail.
I love that outfit though. Those capris are super cute.
Uh-oh.
It still makes me sad to see Bootsy.
I know.
I know that's not his real name. I don't know his real name.
Oh, it's Jackie in the show.
I'm in the actor's name.
Is his name not Brian? It starts with a T.
Tarantino.
Yep, Brian Tarantino. That's what it was.
This show just speaks to me.
I couldn't tell who she was listening to and who she listened to.
I missed it too. Fun fact about Old Town Bar, it's still there, and I believe, well, I've definitely been there a bunch of times, but it's been there a really long time. And it's still open, which is cool.
Your life is so hip, Diana.
Oh, no, no, it is not. I appreciate that, though.
Oh, well, Sean.
Rose on the lapel is such a thing that Amy likes to use, apparently.
Yeah.
Diana, did they have to recreate the stage deli for this, or is this a different deli just standing in for it? Do you happen to know?
I don't know. Worth looking up.
Because the stage deli was closed by the time they started filming this, I believe, wasn't it?
I think, yeah.
It says they used Artie's, which closed in 2017 as a stand-in for the Stage Deli, which closed in 2012.
Thanks, Ken.
You're welcome.
Is that typical comedy comedians like hiring people to write their jokes for them?
If they're on a talk show.
I don't really know. Maybe back then. I don't think that it's as common today.
No, I just meant if they're a talk show host, they have a team of writers. But other than that, I don't
Oh,
know.
a talk show host, yeah, for sure.
I'm confused on the pickle.
Doesn't matter. It's a pickle.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not big on pickle.
Pickles are amazing.
Agree.
His vocal pattern is so weird.
I can't tell if I like him or if I don't like him. It's interesting.
Well, I definitely don't like him.
He seems a little sketch to me for some reason. He can't believe it.
I love her dad.
It's so
Abe
funny.
really is one of my favorite characters.
I love it. It's great.
It's interesting that they kind of moved over to that storyline.
I was
It's
thinking that
interesting
earlier.
that they're focusing on him in this episode as like a B storyline.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier too, because I thought he was only going to be a part of the show as he relates to Midge.
Yeah, me too.
He's funny.
He's totally shady, Charlie.
It's actually kind of funny her writing
Oh,
the
I
correct.
have a feeling that this is going to turn into a bit.
It's either gonna go really good or really bad. No,
Yeah. I think it's going to go well because she needs a reversal from the bomb that happened.
Doink.
It's the name of the episode.
That's how her sets are going right now.
It's definitely going to go well. Definitely going to go well.
If you keep saying it, will it happen? I do like how much faith you have in her.
Here it goes. Oh, I was wrong. Uh, the vocal.
This guy.
That's inconceivable. I caught what you did there. Every time I see him, that's the only character I can think of that he's ever freaking played.
I feel like he'd play a really good turtle.
He would.
I'm not a fan of this. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like.
You don't like seeing the other part of the her husband and his family.
I don't like them being so comfortable with her after one day. Because they did not like Midge, but they're like loving her for some
They liked me.
reason.
No, they absolutely
Whoa.
Yeah, they're
it
not
was
liking
Midge's
her.
parents who did not like Joel.
Oh, okay. I think I spoke a
No,
little.
Charlie, pay attention
Well,
here.
I didn't really get a sense that his parents were like loving Midge. Were they?
See, I didn't either. But I definitely spoke too soon.
Oh my god. Oh my goodness. These two, they're awful.
No.
Man, the music in this is so fantastic.
I love this song so much.
You can stream these soundtracks, John. They're really.
That sound reminds me of the little like do 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 in Grease.
I know, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yes, me too.
This reminds me of keeping up with, or not keeping up appearances. Are you being?
It reminds me of the makeup counters at Elder Beerman and JCPenney's.
I love Are You Being Served?
Me too.
The lyrics of that song are life upon the wicked stage ain't nothing for a girl from Showboat, and I think it's really interesting they used it there.
I think he's lying.
That look.
She is not happy.
Well, how stupid was that husband to think, yeah, Midge's best friend would love to go out with your mistress. Duh.
Men be like that sometimes.
This episode just shows how they're both bombing and things they're trying to do right now.
He's annoying.
Yeah, look at his head, like his head going forward constantly. It's an interesting idiosyncrasy.
She's got a very big Adam's apple too.
Did people
Stress.
really think Ricky Nelson was the next Elvis? What?
We used to have a poster of the Nelson twins on our closet door when I was growing up. His sons, the blonde hair, the really long blonde-haired boys.
I love this apartment. It's so real, the railroad style apartment.
Curious and curious. Interest. I'm loving this show. I don't know why it's been so long since I haven't watched it.
Yeah, had you not watched any of it?
I had seen the first episode, but that's it. Oh,
Ooh. So I'm so looking forward to having a conversation about that line.
It is my favorite so far.
It's also how she carries the clothes. Like she really wears the clothes.
Who's
Absolutely.
anybody here feeling bad for Penny?
Yeah.
no. A little bit.
What? No, I'm feeling awful. I mean, she's definitely not going to be lasting very long.
I don't.
I
don't.
I think she's going to
She's
be
the one who's
very
dating
sad.
a
I
married
don't.
man.
She knew that he was married.
And she's like so blissfully unaware of what is happening right in front of her face. Can she not read what is occurring?
Hmm.
No, and that's why I feel bad for her.
Yeah, I
'Cause
know.
she's
That's what I
just
was gonna
He's
say.
not.
I mean, isn't
empty-headed.
that kind of part of the? That's kind of part of what's sad about it is that she is sort of blissfully unaware of so much, and just the thought of like somebody being like that being hit by a railroad train, which I'm guessing is going to happen, is kind of a bummer.
But in the first,
I see what you're saying, but I mean, she knew he was married, and so I just have trouble feeling sympathy for her.
Yeah, and in the first episode, like she knew who Midge was. She like avoided eye contact, all of that. So I think she just is, she wants to play this part and she's not. She's not going to be able just to fit in like that. So
But isn't that giving her a lot of credit that she's like playing a part? That kind of give that paints a different person than what we're being presented with. That plays some that sort of paints a picture of somebody who is smart and or sort of savvy, I guess is a better word, knows what they're doing. And I feel the opposite. I feel like she was like she's sort of going with the flow a bit. I,
I
I
agree. I agree with you, John, that she's just kind of going with the flow of things.
well, but also
Um,
she may have done that in the beginning, and yes, like it was her mistake, to sort of start an affair with her boss, but at the end of the day, like he left his wife. So, she's kind of in a position of like, oh, he left his wife. Oh, I'm being invited to have dinner with the family. Like, he's giving her legitimacy that she didn't have before. And I do feel bad for her because he's lying to her about how she fits into his life.
But is he lying to himself
A
too?
100%. And I actually feel really bad for Joel. Like I have a lot of empathy for Joel.
I really don't, if we're being honest. At this point, I really don't.
Yeah, I don't
Oh,
either.
I have a
neither do
ton
I.
because there's so much going on here about masculinity and also like what that means and how he's been brought up to believe how he's supposed to be, and he was not fulfilling that role. And I feel bad for him because I feel like he was sort of feeling just not enough, and absolutely not understanding that Midge is the star of the show, and that's not acceptable in this society for the woman to be the star of the show. And so he's sort of left with like not much to contribute to this relationship and to the world as a couple with her. And so I feel really bad for him. I mean, yeah, he did some like his actions are pretty awful, but I actually feel bad for the situation he's in.
I feel like though he I don't think Midge was. I mean, like, yes, she was the star of the show, but she didn't really try and like push that. Like, she really seemed to like want to like push him to be a little bit better or whatever. And I think the thing that bothers me so much about him is that there's no accountability whatsoever for his actions. And I feel like if I saw that a little bit more at this stage, I could feel a little bit bad for him. But so far, you're just not seeing it.
Well, I also think as a man in this time, he's been conditioned not to take accountability. And so he seems a little lost to me because he's not sure what he's done wrong. You know what I mean? Like he's not sure how he got here.
right.
Like he knows like sleeping with his secretary and blowing up his marriage was not the right thing to do, but I don't think he understands that like the concept of accountability. Like it's just everything's been handed to him. So, I just kind of feel like I feel sad for him in that way cuz like he hasn't like these people have not been taught to do that. And you could see that mirrored in the parent relationships too. Like you can kind of see the expectations are so unbelievably high because there's a lot riding on family and tradition and all of that stuff, and he's just sort of caught up in it. And Midge was totally willing to play the part of the housewife and and have that life and do that thing, and he wasn't. And so you kind of see him like he's the catalyst here for everything that's happened. And it's working out, well, maybe not in this episode, but it's working out for Midge and that she's able to find herself because he leaves. But like at the same time, like I don't know, just the amount of pressure being put on this man is a lot. And, and I feel like he's just never been able to follow any sort of direction that he wants.
One thing that I mean that you're sort of touching on here is something that I just find really fascinating when, in any period drama, but especially something like this where, the themes of the series really are about a lot of this, about, a woman's role in society, and and so we are being asked to watch the show, absorb the narrative, and also have a perspective, but it's coming from a 21st century perspective, right? Like when we say things like, I'm really annoyed with Joel, like he's not taking accountability, that was a horrible thing that he did. Um, that all of that is being weighed against how we perceive everything by our own 21st century standards, and I think that it's an interesting thought experiment. Not, I mean, again, like, I think that there, to a degree, there is like, there is certain truth to like what is good and what is bad. We are where we are today in the 21st century because of improvements that have happened over the course of, several decades, right? So that must mean that where we were back then wasn't okay, that we needed to actually improve it. But just a thought experiment is like, what would somebody, or what would an audience of the 50s think of this narrative? How would they perceive Joel leaving his wife for the secretary? And within the context of, well, probably the biggest one is, what would they think of Midge? Like, what would a 50s audience, how would a 50s audience feel about Midge?
I think
um
that they would definitely do exactly what her parents did. What did you do wrong?
right.
And
Right. and
also,
and I
you wanted to touch on that line, your wife is at work. I also
yeah,
think that is the reaction the 50s audience would have, like, especially
I
if there
think
were
they would be.
mothers.
I think that you would have a lot of, if we were having a clubhouse watch party right now in 1957 or whenever this takes place, with a bunch of folks there, we would be talking about how, or there would be a lot of folks in the room talking with earnest feelings about how wrong it is for her to be working, and how, and they would be talking about how, like, there would be a lot of backward mindset. There would be a lot of, what has she done wrong? There would be a lot of, this is a lot, even if it wasn't like this is all Midge's fault, there would be a lot of, how much of this is Midge's fault, right? And I think that that's something just to keep in, just at the very least, to keep in mind, especially when we talk about characters, like feeling sorry, I guess, for characters, especially something like here. Because for me, like, feeling sorry for a character is just seeing somebody in pain, like seeing them in pain, even if I can understand, you put yourself into that pain, it's still, I can still see how he is very much the catalyst for this new journey that she's on, which, even though this episode didn't really well, didn't really show us a lot of this part of it, but this journey seems like it's going to be an upward journey for Midge, and he's the catalyst of that, which, suggests that his journey is going to be the opposite of that. And that, just, in itself, kind of, there's something tragic about that, and at the very least a little sad, even if you can understand that he put himself in that position. But again, I think if we had a room full of 50s folks, a lot of them would be saying things like, why does she have to want that kind of a dream? That's not her place.
Well,
I
John,
she drove him to that, you know. There'd be a lot of that kind of stuff.
well, John, that's just silly because if this was 1957, you'd be in here by yourself because us women would be in the kitchen making dinner for our husbands. We wouldn't have the time to sit here and gab with you about a show for
truth.
45 minutes.
Well, I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, I mean, there was a lot of, I mean, you know, I mean, party lines began in like in the 50s, right? Like phone, you
Yep.
know, the first phones were like pick up the phone and talk to like a ton of people in the neighborhood, right?
Or they shared the party lines where the phones were two different people shared the same line.
Yeah, but I mean,
So
like there was a time in history in like the very beginning of, and I want to say it was in the 50s and the 40s and 50s, where you picked up your phone and like you were sort of sharing it with like everybody in the neighborhood, and so people could actually like be on a call like with a bunch of different people at the same time.
right. Yep.
I
I mean,
bet Miss
Which
Patty
it
would
was
have
like
there was a
loved
time where
that.
like, hmm?
I bet Miss Patty would have loved that. She would have gotten all the good gossip.
um you know, I totally understand, you know, being kind of like, yeah, you put yourself into that position, but I also recognize that I feel that way, because of my perspective on my relationships and the world that I'm living in, and it's just nothing like that world.
I do think like when you brought up about how would they respond, I do think we get a little bit of that in some of the reactions in the show. I mean, like, yeah, of course we see, I think a lot of them would have similar reactions to Midge's mom, but you also see with like her friends and his friends and like his family, there's not a lot of approval for him kind of, embarking on this relationship. Like, even though extramarital affairs may have been kind of um, sort of status quo, but still kind of hush hush, I still think that there was a lot of people who would judge pretty harshly on then going and being with like that mistress.
Who was judging in a way? Because the only judgment that I saw was from Midge's friend. Like everybody else was more kind of like, God damn it! Now, I felt like everybody was more kind of like concerned with how this whole thing was going to affect them. Like his parents are kind of like, oh my gosh, like this is such, you know, like what are you doing? This is affecting us. Whereas like Midge's friend seemed to be the only one that was kind of like, you dirty dog,
I
you know, that kind of
I
I
thing.
felt
found
like
it. Sorry, go ahead.
they were judging, like his parents were judging because, even like when the mom came back, she was just like, no, I'm eating her dessert. Like that they didn't like her and they didn't like this situation.
Oh, well, I sense that they didn't like her because they just didn't think that she was good enough. But
How long? Sorry.
maybe I misinterpreted that.
How long had they been married before he left?
5 years,
4
wasn't it?
years, I believe.
Was it 4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 years.
Okay. Because I was thinking, well, if it was like closer to 7, he might be experiencing like that 7-year itch kind of thing that happens in some marriages.
Yeah. You know what I found kind of interesting, speaking to Stacy's point about reactions from other people, is that when she starts working, the reactions of her coworkers were more like, "Oh, that's sad for you, but how cool that you're like working and, raising kids and everything like that, like you're such a modern woman." Um, so like it's interesting because the younger generation was like, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool."
Yeah,
And
that's definitely
Yeah.
perspective on like where things are headed, right? Like that gives you a little glimmer of like, well, there was, you know, it seems that the next generation was prepped for for
yeah.
a big paradigm shift in at least in the dynamic, like the husband wife dynamics.
Yeah, I noticed that like when they were like, "Oh, how cool, how sad." I was actually in my head, I was going, "Okay, well, maybe we should like address this whole thing of why is it, I mean, I understand why it's sad. I understand why they would say it was sad, but at the same time, you know, why why is it sad to not be married? I or to be divorced. I mean,
Well,
I don't I
I think in that time frame, and you also have to remember, there was not a whole lot women could do without their husband's permission. Like she couldn't have a credit card or anything like that. She couldn't have like a bank account in her own name. Like there's a lot of stuff that she wouldn't have had access to simply because she wasn't married. So I think that part would have been sad.
She wouldn't have had access to it because she wasn't married, or she wouldn't have access to it because she didn't have money to have access to it, because I would
No,
imagine that there
Because
because
she
was.
she
wasn't married.
because she wasn't married. Women weren't
Women
allowed to
had to
have.
have like permission slips and stuff that their
Yeah.
husbands had to sign off on a lot of that.
And money couldn't get past
What?
that, because I mean, I would have to imagine there would be some very
No,
wealthy
like
women
bank
who.
accounts, things like that. You couldn't really. You had to really kind of prove why, like you would need it. You couldn't get a whole lot. Like for
Yeah.
example, even like if you got checks like made out to you, because this actually happened to my sister-in-law recently. It's still a thing, where she got into a car accident. They gave her a settlement or something, and she wasn't even able to like cash the check or something without my brother also being present, because I guess he's on the policy too, but it was like her husband. It's really weird.
Yeah,
Mitch
that's
did
Interesting.
tell her dad.
because when we just with my dad's estate and stuff, it's really funny about like with my sisters and like their husbands, even though they're husbands, like they have to like approve everything. It's really strange. Like they shouldn't have had anything to do with it, because like my dad's house was left to us, but they had to. So yeah, that kind of stuff is really weird. I don't know why that's even a thing.
Did
I
you
didn't
notice that
realize it
Midge
was
did
still
tell her
going
dad
on
that
today. That's crazy.
Midge did tell her dad she wanted to get her own accounts when she was talking to him. She was talking about her own banking accounts briefly there, unless I imagine.
Yeah,
Well,
and I
yeah, but
think
because her dad would have then had to sign off on everything. She
yes.
Right,
said.
Yeah.
but
If
but
you were a
that's what I mean. She's
single
like talking to him about it now because instead of Joel, like she's getting a job, she wants to have her own account, her own checking account. And he was
Yeah,
like,
and if
okay.
you were a single woman, you still had to have your father, your brother, some male presence as the head of the account. You still had to seek permission to withdraw money, to write checks, all of that.
It's
And a
really
lot of the
women
Wow.
women
can't be
in that,
trusted with money.
well, a lot of women in that time period, if you notice, if you read a lot of books or watched a lot of media, they were given allowances and it was cash
Yep.
because their husbands did not want them writing checks and the bank didn't either. And the allowance wasn't for them to spend on themselves, it was
Yeah, it
to
was the
buy their
household
groceries.
budget.
So
Yes, and
I'm
that
curious.
was that.
I'm curious now, when did that change? When did that change? Was it an abrupt change or was it a slow change? I was raised by a single mother, in the, I mean,
70s, 80s.
starting in the 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say it was probably around the 60s, I want to say, and then what was it called? It was in 1974, the
Equal
Credit
credit
Opportunity Act.
opportunity. Yeah.
There it
Yeah.
is. Yep, that's the one.
there it is.
Yep.
Thanks. Thank you, Regina, one of our resident researchers.
Fun fact, though, the Equal Rights Amendment, not the same thing you're talking about, Regina, but that actually never passed. So there was a fight in the 70s for the Equal Rights Amendment, but it was never passed. So people just sort of made the decision on their own to start, embracing more of the equal rights.
Well, I think
Interesting.
it's interesting too. I think it would be interesting to get the demographics of divorce at this time, because or the numbers, because it kind of seems like, you know women needing their own money is going to maybe go hand in hand with the rate of divorce
Yeah, I
as
was
it
gonna
becomes
I
more
was gonna
socially
say, like,
acceptable.
I'm curious if right after that shift happened, if we saw this like spike in divorce, that would certainly suggest that the urge and certainly reasons for divorce would have existed before that, but that it was preventing it because of the negative ramifications on a woman's life if they did. That's super fascinating. Regina, we need to get up on that. Where
Do
where
I
do
smell a
where do
fast
we
talk?
where do we look? Do you have any ideas?
About what? Sorry.
Do I smell a fast talk? Because I feel like I
Oh,
do.
and do you know what's really interesting is when there was this push for, that to change, there was a whole group of women in this country that fought against it. They were adamant. They did not want rules to change. They wanted everything to stay the same. And
Oh yeah,
like,
of course.
it
There
was
was that
sinful
recent
and
movie
evil. Yeah.
recent movie about it. A recent movie about that sort of I feel like it's a big movie. Like it was in the movie theater about the big would you call it an activist? Like the big proponent for women not having equal rights and
Yes.
who
Wasn't
is
it the
who is that?
series?
Yeah, Miss
Yeah, I was gonna say
America.
It was called
Miss
Miss
America or
America.
something.
Miss
Yeah, I
America. Yeah,
watched
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
It was
some
on
of that.
That's
FX.
Yeah,
I
it's
think it
a
had Kate Blanchett.
fabulous series.
Mrs. America.
Watch.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. America.
It's
Yeah,
on Hulu.
that I mean, but that's not surprising. That's like that every I mean, every culture has that like that's really that's more rooted in a lack of desire for any sort of change. You want to sort of keep things the way that they are.
Well, because
And
doing that actually gives rise to more of the counterculture that we saw in the 60s and, sort of the separation of like, the right and the left and, like all of that stuff. Because if you break up a family, you give women money, you break up a family, and then, the very notion of the family goes out the window, according to some. And so you ruin American civilization as it is. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So like that's the whole thing.
as it is defined by some
Yes.
who really feel strongly about it being preserved in that way, or at the very least that way being the majority way, right? And that's really all it is. And you have people who I mean, you have people always on either side of the argument that are chess players and can see several moves ahead, and so she's an example of somebody who was just looking several moves ahead. She was thinking like, if this happens, then this will happen, and then this will happen, and then this will happen, and the world will not be a place that reflects my current values. So I really don't care if these things are, in some way negatively impactful on me as a woman. They ultimately will lead to this world that doesn't look like the world that I want it to look like. And I mean, and I would say that the world that we live in now isn't the world that she wanted it to be. So she was probably right in terms of what she thought all of this would lead to. So she was fighting hard for it.
my parents divorced, was separated in 1978, and um and I think I think the divorce was final probably at the beginning of 79, and they had lost the house that they were buying. And um if I can remember from the stories correctly, my dad had to sign the lease or sign the papers for my mom to be able to move into the HUD assisted apartments that we eventually ended up growing up in for 15 years. So and she could not get into those HUD assisted that HUD assisted program until my dad signed off on it
That was
before they were
my
divorced.
mom and dad divorced at around the same time, but different experience. My mom didn't. My mom was pretty. My mom was fiercely independent at that time, so
Well, she and her only skill was the ability to be able to clean well. And so she had um her main jobs that she found were cleaning office buildings and people's homes for like maybe less than $2 an hour or so. Yeah.
John, I was wondering, I just kind of to circle back to Maisel real quick. Did you notice, and I don't know, I'm sure some of you guys noticed this, but this episode, one of the things I like about it is that ASP likes to show kind of like paralleling storylines. But in this one, what she does is Midge is failing at her stand up comedy, and Joel is failing at introducing his mistress to all the people he wants them.
yeah.
He wants them to like her, and they're both failing at something that they're doing now that they're apart. And I kind of like that about this show, and I thought it was kind of interesting when you guys were like, I didn't think he'd be in this show much, but that's how I see this show, and that's one of the few things that kind of reminds me that it's
I
I
think
don't
it's
I think
I think it's really
ASP likes it.
cool. I think it's really cool because now it tells me a little bit more about what I should be expecting from this show. I was up until this episode really feeling like this is a one woman story, where you just are focusing on one person the entire way through. It's just like, you know, just not an ensemble at all. And I don't think that this is gonna. Well, I mean, I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like it's gonna turn into an ensemble show to But it does feel like Joel is going to have more, like his story is going to be told more. That's sort of what this episode felt like. Maybe not. Maybe that won't happen, but if it does happen, it would be quite welcomed. I would really like that, because I think that I think that being able to see both of their journeys, parallel, I think gives us a much broader perspective on all of these themes of, the times, the gender roles within society at this time, and how different they are then from where they are now, what got us to where we are now, and I just think that both of their storylines help with that a bit. So I hope that he's in more episodes than, or that not just more episodes. I hope that they treat his stuff like separate from Midge, so we can really kind of get to know his journey.
Well, yeah, and I that's why I said earlier, like I do feel bad for him because you can really see how, I mean, obviously we're all still angry that our grandmothers couldn't have their own checkbooks, like, like we're pretty pissed about that as women, right? But like we have to kind of consider also what our society does to the men in our society too, and how that really does play into, you know the the way we had unequal rights for so long, and still in a lot of ways do, and how that plays out with the men in our lives, because like they feel a lot of pressure to then provide, and I mean, we're also talking just about like heterosexual relationships, so like there's that too. But I think there's just a lot going on here, and it is so fair to the story to show what Joel is going through, because it paints a bigger picture of like what they're both up against, which I think is really interesting, and like I feel like I'm learning something in a way.
Yeah, and also, just this idea of where we are now versus where we were then. It's very easy with, you know in with being able to look at something in hindsight is so much easier for us to see the problems than when you're in there. Like, when like, I think that in like 100 years, people will look back at the era that we're in and be very angry about things that seem very commonplace to us right now. I think some of those things people are aware of those problems now, right? Like we have people who are annoyed with aspects of the way that our world is now and want to see change. Um, not everyone. Some folks just don't even see some of those things. But I'm actually suggesting that there's probably things that we aren't even aware of, like that, like 99% of us aren't aware of, that will, as the world changes, over the next 100 years, people will look back and have that same anger that you're talking about having, for our grandmothers who weren't able to have a bank account. Living in it, it's very different, and very hard. And that's sort of what I meant when I said, like, keeping making sure that we keep uh, the perspective of, sorry, my brain is fried. That we understand that we're seeing it through 21st century eyes, and that these characters are not as aware as we are of the problems of their society. We are aware of the problems of their society because we've gotten through those problems, and we don't have a lot of those problems, or we at least don't have them to the degree that they do. Um, yeah.
My grandmother was one of those women who had to have permission as well. She had to have permission to take her grandkids down and have ice cream. Um, so and she had to be handed the money from my grandfather before she could even do that. And so, but my other grandmother was extremely in charge. So, my mom's mom was not, but my dad's mom was extremely in charge of everything. Um, and so, but I was thinking about Abe and his wife's story in the and hoping to be able to see more of them and their story as everything unfolds. Um, I love Abe. Um, I love the mother. I always forget what her name is, but they're very intriguing. And
Do you mean
I,
Rose? Rose?
yes, Rose, Abe and Rose. I would
I love
love.
him.
I mean, yeah.
I mean,
Um,
those characters, Joel and his world and his friends. I mean, I would like to see the show get a little more ensemble-y. I don't know. Am I in the minority there?
No.
No.
No, I agree.
absolutely not. I mean, this is that this is a show that has a, a lot like Stars Hollow has a lot of interesting characters, and um, I'm hoping that the difference is that we get to be able to see the other side of those characters. I mean, we've seen Sookie, we've seen Lorelai, we've seen Luke's story, but I mean, we never really saw the other side of Taylor. We never really saw the other side of Kurt, you know, or Miss Patty or Babette. And so, I mean, it would be interesting for her to have you know, um, that diversity in being able to share all of those stories like that.
One of the things I'm really interested in them exploring more on, and it kind of goes to your point, Shauna, and something Diana mentioned earlier, with some of the gender roles, is also exploring, like, Abe as a father and his role as a father, and the same with Joel, because that is something, like, if we talk about like toxic masculinity and things like that, that was a role back then where a lot of the men didn't have as active of a role in like the child rearing. And so now Joel is kind of forced into that situation. And in some ways, Abe, not that he's like, forced into that, but I think he looks at this perspective a little bit differently than Rose does.
And and I think it's interesting how that part where Midge comes in and she's talking about the pink dress and she's got the package and she's pouring the tea and her mother's sitting at the table and all of a sudden you see she's talking about how, oh, I'll pick up the kids at Miss So and So's, and then you see her son in the doorway, and she's like, Mom, I told you I would, and then she's like, they're drunks, and she gets up and walks out of the room. She did not want her grandchildren around that, or she just wanted her grandchildren in the home, and that kind of made me chuckle a little bit because it's like, okay,
Well,
Or is she doing that because she wants Midge to think she has less alternatives because she doesn't like her working?
maybe, yeah, I mean, maybe so. I mean, I just got a bit of a chuckle out of her when she did that. She was just like, whatever, you know.
well, I mean, it's definitely funny, and I think it is played for a little bit of a laugh. So, I think it's a brilliant piece of a scene, and I do think also that it's Midge's mother wants her daughter married and taken care of, and all the trappings that goes with that, because it also reflects on her. In the last episode, she made up a whole story about where Joel is. Oh, he got a big promotion. Oh, he can't, that's why we haven't seen him around. Like, he's just so busy all the time because this is how great my daughter is doing. Her husband got a great big promotion at work, and that's why he's not here. So it's all about like the image for her. But I also think she again, like, the parents are not willing to see their children as adults. Like, they're only seeing them as children. So, Midge made a decision about where her son should be, and her mother said, "Nope, I'm making the decision." And that was the decision. And they're undermining her authority. And then of course she gets a job, which, as a 20 something year old woman, like, she is absolutely well within her rights to do. And then she gets flack from both of her parents, and Abe has to show up and, like, quote, see it for himself, and looks at her with just such disdain that she's doing this thing, that she's made this decision. And so I think where Ethan is like part of, like, how they see their daughter living, and they're not approving of her decisions.
I
I,
sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, man.
Well, you can respond to Diana. I was going to change the subject slightly.
Um, yeah, um, I don't know. I just say it the relationship between Abe and Midge. I mean, I really, I'm really, I'm not concerned about it, but I mean, he's just, oh, he's just um, very hard-headed man. Um, you can tell that by even this episode and prior episodes of who he is, and yeah, I agree with the whole, we we have to keep appearances up when it came to Rose and the last episode, she's just and and maybe that's half of why she just kept the grandkids at her home, so but that's where I was. Sorry. Go ahead, Mandy.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is that we've spent a lot of time talking about how women could not like make it without the assistance of a man. But if you look at Joel, just 2 episodes ago, he was basically asking Midge to take him back because he wasn't with Penny at that time. Like, um, And then Midge says no, so all of a sudden now he's with Penny again. It's like he doesn't know how to be a full person without a woman to take care of him.
And those that's actually um good point there, because even today sometimes that's present in today's society, where a man leaves a woman for uh, another woman, and he figures out that the grass is not nearly as greener as he thought it would be, and begs to come back and expects that the door is just going to fly wide open. And so, I mean, yeah.
But
And
I don't think Joel was sleeping with Penny Pan because he wasn't satisfied by Midge, like, in that regard. I think Joel was sleeping with Penny Pan because he felt absolutely useless as a man, like that he just wasn't making it in the comedy. He wasn't he knew that Midge was making all of those moves for him, like he knew that he couldn't do it on his own, which is kind of sucky to feel as a person who like just wants to, get it done and like be good at something. And he also says he wasn't, he doesn't know what he even does at work all day. So I feel like his affair is less about sex and more about his need to find something fulfilling. And I think Penny is just sort of a dime a dozen type of person that she's just going to be enamored by him anyway. And he probably feels really important around her. He was her boss,
Oh,
so
100%. Yeah.
that's the only person in his life that he feels kind of important around, because with Midge, she's the one pulling all the strings and being charming and absolutely like, just like stealing the show. And he's trying so hard to do that and he can't. So he finds someone else who will let him be the star.
I agree, Diana. I do. I agree with that 100%. Um, he's just he wants to do he wants everything, and he wants to be able to do it and succeed. And and he didn't. And Midge was just the one that was, like you said, was making it happen, and but it wasn't him. So yeah, I agree. I agree. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't and it wasn't Midge that he was actually angry with. He was angry with himself.
I thought
And
that.
just
Oh, sorry, hon.
yeah. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. Well, it's a little bit different, but I was just gonna say that I thought that ASP was throwing lots of shade at Penny when they're like, "So tell us about your backstory," and then it goes to completely cut to a different scene. Like, we don't want to know.
I hadn't noticed that, but that is fun.
That's good. That's real good. Yeah. ASP has a way of being able to let her audience know that she doesn't like things. I mean, I've never met her personally, but I feel like through what she writes and what she shows us, that we know her pretty well of what she doesn't like, at least.
I think that Midge is the I think that Midge is a closer personality type to Amy in general, like than say like Lorelai.
Hmm, that's interesting.
Well, Midge is based on her dad, so if she
Yeah,
probably is like her
if
dad.
she's anything like her dad, then
Yeah.
probably then probably it is similar. I mean, there's just a lot of just a lot of things. I mean, that just remind me of her and of Amy in the Midge character. And I didn't really, to be honest with you, I rarely got that sense from Lorelai. I mean, there's bits of every character in the like a creator puts a little bit of themselves in every character, I think, to a degree, but Midge does seem to be a much more similar to Amy's personality.
Well, and I'm getting a little bit of a, not to talk too much about characters from another show, but I am getting such a Lorelai slash Rory, um, um, Ed Herman, like, like that's what I'm getting. I'm getting that sort of, that father daughter or grandfather daughter relationship where he expects so much of her. Like he expects, like, they're sort of intellectual matches. Like you can see that with Abe and Midge. Like they have a relationship that she does not have with her mother. Like they have more of an understanding, and it's really interesting because you kind of get that he's disappointed in her on more of an intellectual level than like her mom, which is, which she's just sort of like, what are we going to tell everyone? But I just kind of get that, I get that same relationship vibe from Gilmore Girls as I'm getting here in Maisel. I don't know if anybody else has picked up on that, but the
He did tell her
richard
she
the
should have.
richard daughter relationship.
Didn't he tell her she
Yeah.
should have been more practical with her education?
Yeah, yeah, but that's a great line because of like the time they're in. I don't know.
I'm like seriously satisfied with the fact that I get to see a little bit more. Uh, I mean, and that's why, I mean, I might be one of the majority of the people who is okay with there not being any more Gilmore Girls, because I still get to see Amy Wright. I still get to see the stories that she tells, and through Maisel, and maybe further in the future through anything else. So I'm satisfied with hearing this story because I've already heard that story, and I will revisit that story again. But I'm 100% satisfied with there not being another Gilmore Girls because there's more to come from Amy. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Can we talk about Midge bombing and like what that means? it's
Oh,
it's so
100%.
funny.
Yes,
Well, like
let's
my
do
first
that.
thought was her first sets, or quote unquote sets that weren't really sets but really rants, um, were about her life, and just so the way she shows up in the dress, and you can kind of tell from her demeanor that like this is a woman who's like wandered into the wrong club, and wow, that's really funny. But when she kind of deliberately goes on stage in the pants and is talking about the fun little thing that happened to her when she started her first job today, like I just
Her
was
first
like, oh
hourly job.
yeah, like she's speaking to a room full of people who probably clocked in and out today and like don't get why it's so charming and so funny. And like I loved it because it really does show her privilege, but also like her lack of awareness of what space she's wandered into doing this stand up thing, and like how that's gonna shape the character that she presents on stage. And you see her wrestling with this idea of a name and like, who am I going to be? And like she isn't sure because the person that she is on stage when she wanders in drunk is actually very funny to the people who are sitting there. Maybe not to us because we're like experiencing her life and why she's there. But I think like this whole idea of like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, what is my performance set going to look like? And who am I going to be to these people? Like, I love that we saw that it just did not work, that her charming story about working her first day at a department store, like, doesn't resonate, doesn't translate.
I
So
100% agree. Oh, sorry, Stacy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh no, 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 you can go.
I just wanted to say like really quick. I loved seeing. I mean, I didn't love seeing it because I got the secondhand embarrassment from watching both of those sets, just absolutely bomb. But
Same.
after the first set, she says, "Oh my god, like I've only ever done this like drunk or stoned. Like, what if that's like the reason why I'm funny?" So right away, she comes to that realization that like, oh, I've had this sort of courage beforehand. Now I need to reassess and see what I'm doing wrong. Goes in a completely wrong direction and bombs even further. But that's what I liked right away, that she noticed, oh yeah, I had this help me. Now that I don't have that at the moment, what am I doing wrong? On top of what everything like Diana has said, I agree 100%. I peeped that too. I thought it was really cringy seeing her talk about like her charming little job, and all that she mentioned really. That's all I wanted to say.
I agree, Regina. I was actually just going to ask, what did you guys make of like the bombing? Did you think some of it was like insecurity? Did you think that she just sort of thought like, oh, like I can naturally do this, and maybe was like overly confident and then obviously could not read the room?
No,
Or
I think she overthinks things when she I mean, she had no inhibitions in the other stand-up sets. And this one she's thinking about it, she's worried about it, and she doesn't really want to talk about herself even though she did on those other ones. But she thinks that she can be funny trying to be, I don't know. I just think she overthinks things. I'm
She
I
over it.
think she
absolutely overthinks things. I think she takes a
Yeah.
very calculated approach to her comedy, and trying to organize things. And it reminded me of something that I would do, but I know that's, to me, comedy seems something like it's natural and it can't be calculated. You can't find something like an ad in the newspaper and have someone else do it for you. So she definitely overthinks things. Absolutely.
Well,
and
sometimes I think that it's interesting that in the context of like an aspiring comic, she's presented as this like person who keeps a notebook and is constantly at the clubs, like, jotting things down, but when you see her in social settings, like I thought that was very interesting. They showed her at that party, and there was just that one shot where they pull back from her, and she is doing a stand-up routine essentially for all of these women that are all around her. She's the center of the attention, and it's just flowing out of her. No notes, no analysis, nothing. And I think that that's kind of the what the episode was sort of getting at, with her not being able to come up with a name and not wanting to use her own name. I think the idea is, Midge, you need to be you on stage. Like, throw the notes away. Stop with all of the, like, trying to calculate how this is supposed to go. Do what you do at parties. And that who does those, who, like, who just stands up at their wedding and just does a impromptu speech, that is Midge Maisel, and that's your stage name.
Yeah.
and she was just well over prepared. I think.
Well,
I think she thought she was overly prepared, and then she just kind of like and then she just had no it just she just went plain, and I mean, I have those moments all the time where it's just like I say something and then I say something else and then I forget what I was going to say and then I make myself feel silly. So, yeah, I get it. She was just well overly prepared for what she wanted to say and then she overthought it.
Well, I also think that Midge Maisel is brilliant at everything she does. And so a lot of it just comes so naturally to her. And even making notes in the notebook was, just sort of her natural. Like that first episode, on the rewatch, I was kind of watching her very much like pick up the pen and start writing things down, just like, as she would write a grocery list, just like absolutely that comes naturally to her. And then kill it, just everything she says and does, every move she makes is she's killing it all the time. And I think it's really foreign for her to like not do well at something. And that's why she's like quitting right away before she has even a minute to think about the failure and think about why it failed. Like she's not interested. She is not used to failing. She
Yeah.
she kills it everywhere she goes, and I think that's why she loves the party, because she's like back in her natural habitat where like things are working, things are flowing, all eyes are on her. And I just think she has that natural ability, and she hasn't failed enough to gain the sort of humility you kind of need to work through a process. Like Susie says, like, this is a process. She doesn't understand it to be that yet.
I think it's really interesting that so many people said that, she sort of overthinks or over prepares. Because Susie seemed to think the opposite, that she didn't bother spending any time writing jokes or preparing for her set. And I agree with John that she's best kind of like on the spot, um, and not thinking too much about it. But how does that translate into, like, how can she prepare but not over prepare? You know what I mean? Like, I
Well, I
think that
just
some level of preparing is necessary, um, for a life of stand up, but how does she reach that middle ground to where she's doing it just enough without overthinking it?
I meant she was thinking all the way down to the club about what she could talk about on her daily job life, right? She was just thinking, oh, these funny situations, and then she got up there and she's trying to do it, nobody's reacting, so then she starts thinking more, trying to be funnier, and it's
Yeah.
just failing and failing.
Yeah, I mean,
She wasn't being.
I think that she's not really preparing right. She isn't preparing what's right for her. And of course, Susie is not part of her preparation process. So she doesn't she can only judge it based on the results, and what she sees there is somebody who didn't prepare. If she was a part of Midge's process, she might see, oh wow, no, she's like way over preparing and way overthinking this. Just she's doing all the wrong things, because who she actually is actually contrary to all of those things. She's not the type of person who should be who will she's not the type of person at all that we've been presented with so far as the type of person who would answer an ad in a newspaper to have somebody write jokes for her. You know what I mean? Like that seems contrary to who Midge is as far as I've been presented to her. And I think that if it, well, not only if she did, once she found out, when Susie found out that she did that, she was like, I can't believe that you did that. That's ridiculous. So I think that there was preparation there. I just think that it was the wrong preparation. And what is the right preparation? What is the right preparation? What is the right balance of preparation? And gotta let this be flexible. You gotta,
Yeah.
gotta go with the flow. That's what she needs to learn. Like that's gonna be her journey.
Tiffany, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like back then, female comedians, they had to have like a character. They had to have this. They couldn't just go up there as themselves. They had to have like this. They had to play this part. So I think that she was trying to do that, and she didn't realize that Mrs. Maisel was actually a character, like this jilted wife, and it was funny because it was out of the norm. Like you weren't supposed to be divorced, and you were, so she's experiencing all these things as this character, as herself. So it was interesting that she was trying to go away from that, and like John had said, that she did best when she was just herself.
I agree. I
Yeah,
completely
that
agree with
makes a
that.
lot
And
of
I
sense.
think that theme is there in the fact that she refuses to go by her own name. That's like that really seems like a relevant part of what's happening here. That's like, a literal a literal representation of what's actually happening under the surface psychologically with the character. She doesn't want to take her name in the same way that she doesn't want to be herself. in her comedy. And as soon as she starts to realize I need to be myself in my comedy, that's when she probably is going to embrace her own name in the act.
Can we talk about the actor who plays the joke writer?
Wallace Shawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's amazing and hilarious and awesome. I mean,
yeah. I mean that is I can only imagine, just like because he's been on. He's been on our screens forever. I mean, I can't even remember the last thing he was in that I seen, but he just is absolutely awesome. Um, and I hope we see a little bit more of him. Um, just
anyone here ever? I mean, it's a little, it's kind of. Well, has anybody ever seen Vanya on 42nd Street? I had a feeling.
I have
It's a
not.
very theater school. It's a very theater school thing to have watched. But Wallace Shawn is in it. It's it's really rad. But it's a filmed version of the play Uncle Vanya, done. Uh, it's a filmed version of a Broadway production of Uncle Vanya, um, on 42nd Street, or I don't know if that would. To be honest with you, I don't know if that's Broadway. If it was a Broadway show, but it's a really good. It's a really good movie. And the reason why I even bring it up is he's just absolutely awesome in it. He's such a good actor.
What's that?
It's called Vanya on 42nd Street. And
So
also the actor Larry Pine is in it. We know Larry Pine, right?
probably, but I probably couldn't put his name with his face.
Larry Pine played the role of, I believe his name was Simon on Gilmore Girls, the man that Emily was dating in that short period.
Oh, okay.
That's his real name in life.
Yeah, Larry Pine. Julianne Moore is in it. It's rad, but it's very much like it's very much like a movie that would like a young theater school student, such as myself, would have been really geeking out over back in the mid '90s when it came out. Certainly was no blockbuster, that's for sure.
Oh, those good old '90s.
Folks, I'm gonna actually get running. But thank you.
Thanks,
Did
John.
everybody
Great night.
harvest?
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye.
John.